If a house collapses and kills the owner, the builder himself shall be put to death. That chilling, stark sentence, found in the Code of Hammurabi more than 3,000 years ago, is where I want to begin, because it reveals a truth that the modern world has deliberately overlooked. No one is allowed to reap the benefits without bearing the risks. That ancient law, though carved in stone in Babylon, still echoes across the world today. Have you ever noticed this recurring pattern? The decision-maker often stands furthest from the consequences. An official signs an order for military intervention and then flies home safely, while thousands of lives are swept into chaos. A banker pushes millions of toxic loans into the market, pockets a bonus, then leaves taxpayers to foot the bill when everything collapses. Or an expert lectures you on ethics, yet fails to live by his own sermons. This is not just injustice. It is a reversal of the natural order of survival. For if mistakes are not punished, the system will be overrun by frauds and fools. Humanity did not evolve through lofty ideals, but through the price paid for missteps. When pain disappears, learning also disappears. The book you are about to hear about Nassim Nicholas Taleb's Skin in the Game, The Hidden Asymmetries in Daily Life, is a wake-up call. The name itself carries significant weight. Its core is not about success, but about symmetry in life. If you gain a benefit, you must also endure a loss. If you want power, you must bear the consequences. Everything else is just a trick. I will not lead you into a lecture, but into a labyrinth of stories from the giant Antaeus, who was only invincible while touching Mother Earth, to the Code of Hammurabi, to Fat Tony, the street-smart trader who understands the truth better than 1,000 professors, from the stubbornness of a small minority that can change an entire society, to the intellectuals who know much but are fools, from the cheap currency of virtue signaling to the silent sacrifice of true souls with genuine faith. This book is not written to comfort you. It unmasks. It points out the deception that you might be a part of. It forces you to look straight ahead. Are you living with skin in the game? Or are you just standing safely but emptily on the sidelines? That question is not easy to answer. To grapple with it, you must scrutinize every decision you make. When you advise someone, would you dare to follow your own advice? When you receive a benefit, do you also share the risk? When you talk about fairness, are you ready to suffer a loss to maintain that fairness? So I ask you, in a world where injustice is hidden behind every contract, every piece of news, every slogan, will you choose to be the safe dog on a leash, or become the wolf, accepting danger to keep your soul intact? And before entering the book review, we encourage listeners to buy and read it to fully appreciate the content. For only by reading this entire book will you truly understand the issues I am telling you about. Please buy the book and support the author. Now, let us embark on the review of this book. Every idea truly lives only when the person who speaks it must pay the price themselves. When flesh touches reality and blood mixes with risk, that is the only foundation that keeps intelligence from drifting into soulless blocks of words. Imagine Antaeus, the giant who possessed boundless strength. As long as his feet remained firmly planted on Mother Earth, Heracles knew that secret well. He lifted Antaeus off the ground and crushed him in midair. This lesson shatters all illusions. Separate a person from the grounding of experience, from the friction of the real world, and even the most powerful will be reduced to a dried corpse. I have seen so many who think they can govern the world from cold meeting rooms, while their hands have never touched the dirt. They are the ones who make decisions for others, but never face the line of fire. They chant slogans about regime change in Iraq, Libya, and Syria, and then abandon millions of people plunged into chaos, slavery, and the human trafficking markets. They remain safe in their suburban homes, their lawns clean of pesticides, their children attending private schools. These people call failure mere uncertainty, but I call it the farce of those who know no pain. When you are never punished by your own decisions, you learn nothing. The system is the one that learns by eliminating the ignorant, the arrogant, and those who externalize risk. The incompetent pilot will end up at the bottom of the ocean. The negligent doctor is forced out of the survival circle. The reckless driver lies in the cemetery. Humans die, but the system gets smarter. Evolution is not thanks to theory or dogma, but to the price paid. Without skin in the game, there is no evolution. I recall a bitter image, a former U.S. Treasury Secretary, who pocketed over $100 million from Citigroup in the run-up to the 2008 crisis. When the bank collapsed, he did not return a single penny. Instead, He pointed his hand toward the black swan, a beautiful word to cover up irresponsibility. The grammar teacher in Madrid, the cannery worker, the local official, they were the ones who absorbed his losses, while he remained comfortable, his bank account swelling. That is the naked asymmetry. Profits are pocketed privately, while losses are borne by society. If power is not decentralized, if those making decisions are not forced to be on the same shaky boat, the system will self-correct in a more brutal way. It will explode, and then reorganize from the ruins. History has repeated this time and again. I learned a principle that seems simple, but few dare to face. You will never convince anyone that they are wrong. Only reality can do that. All eloquent arguments are meaningless if not tested in real life, and reality is heavy-handed. It does not care who is right or wrong. It only keeps the survivor. The danger of the modern age is the ascendancy of a class of people who know how to explain, but lack the knowledge to do. They memorize complex models, bombastic terminology, but have zero understanding of how a system survives a shock. They think safety comes from thick regulations, mountains of paperwork. I believe safety only exists when the person steering the ship is ready to go down with it. Skin in the game. That is not a choice. It is a condition for existence. It is both a filter and a whip. It cuts off the pretenders. It exposes those who talk much but dare not act. And above all, it is the bridge connecting people to the truth. I mentioned a former U.S. Treasury Secretary as a vivid example of brutal asymmetry. Let us call it the Robert Rubin trade, a bizarre game where the player flips a coin. Heads, he pockets hundreds of millions. Tails, millions of taxpayers bear the burden. And the most dangerous thing is that the person feels no shame. He even uses euphemisms to justify it, as if the horrific collapse were just an unavoidable accident. We mistakenly believe that separating the leadership from the front line is a sign of civilization. The truth is the opposite. Emperor Julian of the Roman Empire died on the battlefield with a Persian spear through his chest. The last Byzantine emperor shed his robes and charged into the enemy with a sword. Even the prince of the British royal family had to fly a helicopter in the Falkland War to prove that status does not exempt one from bearing responsibility. It is that risk-taking that creates legitimacy. A person with power who does not accept risk is merely an imposter. You see, what many call the administrative machine is essentially a construct built to shield people from the consequences of their own actions. The more layers of paperwork, the greater the distance between the decision and the consequence. And when that trap becomes too heavy, the system inevitably seeks to self-correct, often through violent explosions. The 2008 banking crisis was not an unforeseen disaster. It was the long-term accumulation of the result of separating profit and loss. I once heard an old banker, his face flushed with wine, advise, "I only grant long-term loans. When the debt matures, I will have disappeared." A blatant confession that he only wanted to leave the scene before the house collapsed. 3,000 years ago, the Code of Hammurabi already foresaw this deceit. If a house built by a builder collapses and kills the owner, the builder himself must pay the price with his life. Justice is found in cold symmetry. Whoever benefits must also bear the risk. Yet today, self-proclaimed modern thinkers believe they can escape the ancient law merely with signatures and euphemisms. If a system lacks a mechanism to compel decision-makers to internalize losses, that system will inflate with illusion and then burst. You can create mathematical models and beautiful statistical tables, but if they do not tie the designer to the very consequences of their mistaken predictions, they are only harmless decoration until they morph into a time bomb. I emphasize this. Real learning only happens when the one who pays the price. Those who like to invoke the black swan, to deny responsibility, have misunderstood even the concept itself. The black swan only matters when we recognize the limitations of prediction, and consequently must keep ourselves in direct contact with risk. Instead, they turn it into a shield of privilege. There is a bitter paradox: the fancier the suit, the higher the seat in air-conditioned offices, the greater the resistance to the concept of skin in the game. They prefer to believe they can design society, chart economic diagrams, and construct nations like a game of Lego, while never daring to stake their own well-being on those models. And I understand. That very separation is the seed of all weakness. Systems evolve not by adding elements, but by subtraction. In biology, less adapted species disappear, leaving space for the fitter. In economics, reckless banks must fail to serve as an example. In life, Foolish risk-takers often lie by the roadside. Without elimination, there is no learning. Without skin in the game, there is no substance. I want to lead you to another land, where justice and symmetry were inscribed thousands of years ago. That is the Hammurabi stele on the black slab in Babylon. Its 280 laws were recorded, and its spirit is simple. Who creates the risk must pay the price. If a house built by a builder collapses and kills the owner, the builder himself must be executed. It sounds harsh, but compare it to today, when a bank collapses. The executives leave with bulging pockets, while taxpayers, teachers, workers, and office staff bear the consequences. Hammurabi saw through this gimmick 3,000 years ago. Justice here is not an abstraction. It is society's ultimate mechanism for survival, from Hammurabi to the Bible. The law continued to evolve. First came love your neighbor as yourself, then came the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But I believe in a more robust version, the silver rule, do not do unto others what you would not have them do unto you. The difference is small, but crucial. We know what is harmful more clearly than what is good. Therefore, avoiding harm is always a stronger defense than trying to impose good according to one's subjective view. Look at a society where people impose things in the name of good. Revolutionaries believe in universalism, which assumes they can apply a set of rules to all of humanity. The result is often oppression, suffocation, and ideological incarceration. Universalism, which sounds so noble in reality, crushes the specific individual. We do not live in abstraction. We live on a small scale, in neighborhoods, in specific communities. Principles only truly matter at a close range. The orator Isocrates once said, "Treat the weaker nation as you would expect the stronger nation to treat you." That is the silver rule applied internationally. But how many powerful people misuse the golden rule to justify, I will impose on you the good that I think is good for myself. And so, all disasters begin with high intentions. I never stop warning that all generalizations are dangerous. Immanuel Kant once wrote about the categorical imperative, act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. It sounds reasonable, but in reality, it leads to absurdity. This is because we are not abstract beings. We are limited by scale, by proximity, by context. Imposing a single formula on the entire world is opening the door to unyielding dogmatists. I clearly see this danger in political interveners, who constantly compare a dictator in the Middle East with the Prime Minister of Norway. They forget that there are no shortcuts in the world, and that such a comparison is meaningless. All such interventions ignore the multivariate nature of the system, and the result is often bloodshed. Justice is not in beautiful speeches. Justice is in cold symmetry. The creation of risk must come at a price. We have survived for thousands of years thanks to this simple principle. When it is forgotten, when those who benefit do not share the losses, society steps directly onto the path of self-destruct. In a world where everyone tries to prove their nobility by dispensing benefits, the truth lies in the restraint of evil. I do not need you to make me happy, just do not hurt me. The silver rule, by its very humility and restraint, is stronger than any grand slogan. I leave the shadow of Kant and lead you back to an old friend, Fat Tony. He does not write philosophical treatises or lecture in polished words. He lives by trading, by looking directly at reality. And he has a simple rule. Do not give anyone garbage, and do not take garbage from anyone. Symmetry is an everyday affair for him. His view exposes a clear fact that intellectuals often hide. Never trust the person who gives advice, but is not personally exposed to its downside. Imagine a doctor prescribing poison, an investor leading you into a pitfall, an official giving orders while living safely far from the consequences. All of them can continue to exist, only because they do not have to bear the pain of their own actions. In a truly symmetrical world, they would have been eliminated long ago. When discussing risk, I often talk about three types of people: the rogue, the fool, and the rogue fool. The fool does not understand the risk they are taking, confusing luck with skill. The rogue is smarter. He externalizes the risk. The rogue fool is a disaster, not understanding his actions yet still seeking profit. Society is safe only when all three types are forced to pay the price. Another issue that constantly concerns me is the opacity of causality. We think we understand why an event happens, but in reality, much of that understanding is an illusion. A decision can lead to countless unforeseeable consequences. and only the collision with reality tells us which ones are real. Those who like to theorize often forget this truth. They win the debate in the meeting room, but lose miserably in life. Fat Tony is the opposite. He does not need arguments, only results. Here, the cruel truth resonates. We are better at doing than at understanding. A plumber knows how to make water flow, while an economist can spend a lifetime writing reports without understanding the flow of capital. In society, true value is not in words, but in actions. I have met so many people called experts and found that most are just word peddlers, with no skin in the game. Their words are there for frivolous. There is a funny paradox. Prediction in words and prediction in action are two different worlds. I'd have witnessed those who made bad predictions become wealthy, while those who predicted correctly often remain poor. Because what matters is not how many times you are right, but the payoff when you are right. One correct time can sustain you for life. 100 small correct predictions will now save you from one fatal mistake. And so, all true wisdom must go hand in hand with commitment. If a person is unwilling to put themselves at risk, all their knowledge is suspect. Skin in a game becomes the only filter to separate the empty talker from the one who truly knows what is going on. What is called rationality is not in polished models, but in survival. A collective that endures for a long time is proof of its rationality. Behaviors considered foolish on paper are sometimes absolutely wise, because they help the community overcome turmoil. Rationality is not formal logic. Rationality is defined by what keeps you alive. I want to pause for a moment to show you the skeleton of this entire journey. I call it the ribcage of intention, because everything I have written, from the arrogance of the interveners to the story of Hammurabi to Fat Tony, are not disjointed pieces. They are the backbone, the tendons connecting into a single body, the principle that there can be no knowledge, no justice, and no ethics without symmetry and risk. If you notice, every field is haunted by this disparity. In economics, investors pocket the rewards while society bears the losses. In politics, officials sign decisions that kill thousands of people but remain safe themselves. In science, people in white coats announce discoveries but do not face the consequences if those discoveries are flawed. In religion, the one who preaches doctrine makes no sacrifice for that doctrine. I look around and see various fractures. They all share the same root, the separation of words from consequences, the separation of honor from action, and the separation of benefits from losses. When there is no skin in the game, everything becomes a magic trick, and that magic trick kills more people than we imagine. Someone asked me, so how do you recognize someone truly trustworthy? The crude answer: examine what they risk. A person who puts his entire fortune into the fund he manages is more trustworthy than one who only speaks well. A craftsman who dares to engrave his name on the product is more trustworthy than an anonymous industrial manufacturer. A writer willing to let time judge rather than just seeking academic titles is more trustworthy than a professor who hides behind their papers. This leads me to a concept I cherish more than anything: soul in the game. You can call it honor, you can call it dignity. It is not just skin and flesh, but the soul put into the work, the words, the actions. A carpenter makes a table not just to sell, but also to prove his identity. A poet writes verses not just to print books, but also to keep himself from betraying his own values. Honor does not accept bargaining. There are things you will never do even if someone places a mountain of gold in front of you. And there are things you must do, even if you have to pay with your life. The duels of the last century, where people walked into death just to keep their word, might sound insane to modern people, but it was that very insanity that made them human. Today, many have learned to excuse themselves. I have to feed my family, pay my children's tuition, so I accept working for a dubious lobby group. But in truth, they have sold their soul cheaply. If there is no inviolable boundary, if everything has a price, then you have abandoned your dignity. There is another kind of honor, putting oneself in danger not to protect one's own self, but to protect others. When a captain sinks with the ship, when a soldier shields his body so his comrades can live, that is soul in the game. That sacrifice is not just an epic, it is a necessary condition for the collective to survive. I still remember the feeling of holding a book by a true craftsman. Such individuals never cut corners to maximize profit. They work with a private sense of pride. They would rather starve than sell something of substandard quality. In the age of industrialization, this type of person is rare. But it is they who keep humanity from sliding completely into deceit. There is a principle I never cease to repeat. Every person must internalize their own mistakes. The phrase sounds strange, but it contains a profound truth. Whoever creates the risk must share its consequences. Otherwise, the equilibrium will shatter. Look at the merchants of the past. When they traded on the sea, the ship carrying grain, fabric, or spices could be swallowed by a storm at any moment. But that same merchant was also on the ship, sharing the uncertainty with the sailors and the cargo. If they lost everything. If they succeeded, they reaped the profit. That is primal symmetry, the thing that kept commercial transactions meaningful. Contrast that with the modern world. A fund manager can make risky investment decisions, and when everything falls apart, he has already retreated with a bonus pocketed. Who bears the debt? The depositors, the ones who were never consulted. This is the persistent problem of the age, the separation between the decision maker and the consequence bearer. I once sat in a doctor's office, observing how quickly he scribbled prescriptions as if to hastily conclude the appointment. He would not have to take those pills, nor share the side effects with me. That asymmetry creates a dangerous ethical gap. If he had to take the same dosage he prescribed for the patient, would he still be so casual? The story of Rabbi Ravra, an honest merchant living in the 4th century, still resonates. He was offered a low price during his prayer, and when he finished, he still accepted that price instead of taking advantage of the misunderstanding to earn more money. Because in his mind, a word thought was a word promised. Fairness does not need laws. It lives in the skin and flesh of people. All long-lasting civilizations understand one thing: when decision-makers do not share the downside, the system rots. If a captain gives orders but never boards the ship himself, that ship will sink sooner or later. If officials impose laws but do not live in the same environment as the people, society will collapse. I do not believe the clever justifications of the professional class. They often say they act for the common good, while in reality, they are only shirking responsibility. Once again, I remind you, do not let yourself be fooled by words. Look at the extent to which they put skin in the game. What makes it clearest to me is the existence of what is called co-risk, where everyone is literally on the same boat. When that boat is rocking in a big storm, no one can escape individually. It is that co-risk that creates true equality, unlike equality on paper. This is visceral equality, where everyone endures the same storm. Conversely, when someone stands outside and still benefits, injustice immediately appears. Those people are no longer community members. They are merely parasites. They feed on the sweat and blood of others without giving anything back. I have seen enough to understand that injustice does not stem from the wealth gap, but from the fact that some people can avoid risk, while others cannot. That asymmetry is the source of resentment, resistance, and collapse. There is an unwritten rule that I always keep: if my words can prompt someone to act, I must also be willing to bear the same consequences. If I advise someone to invest, I must put my own money into it. If I advise someone to try a method, I must also live with the result. Only then do words carry weight. It is not the majority that decides, but a stubborn, steadfast minority. I have witnessed this principle repeat many times in many contexts. Start with a meal. If only one person in the group is strictly vegetarian, the entire dining table will have to rearrange to accommodate that preference. No one forces them, but the majority will self-adjust. In supermarkets, products labeled halal or kosher are ubiquitous, not just for the small Muslim or Jewish communities. The reason is simple: the supply chain always chooses the path of least resistance, and that path often entails complying with the stringent requirements of the minority group. I call that the power of the uncompromising minority. They do not need much, just not to back down, and so the society around them has to change. This is also true in language. A minority language may disappear, but if its speakers resolutely do not give it up, the surrounding environment gradually has to learn to communicate. Gradually, the language survives and sometimes reasserts itself, overwhelming the supposed majority. This power is present in politics as well. A small but persistent group can pull an entire society toward an extreme. They do not need majority support, just a majority that wants to avoid conflict. And because people are inherently averse to confrontation, the majority will accept concessions. Thus, the small becomes the dominant force. Hidden here is a danger that many do not see. Those who preach universalism often think they represent the common good, but in reality, They only impose through the power of their own inflexibility. When they declare, everyone must follow this good thing, what they are actually doing is forcing others to live the way they choose. Universalism is once again revealed as a tool of ideological violence. I still recall a debate with a friend in France. He believed that freedom of speech must have limits, that there are things one is not allowed to say. I asked, who sets that limit? Which uncompromising minority will seize the power to define it? And then, what they consider taboo today might be what you want to say tomorrow. At that point, you will understand what it means to be dominated by a small but obstinate group. It is also necessary to note that not all minorities are dangerous. There are minorities that drive progress, like scientists who stubbornly pursue truth despite the ridicule of the crowd. It is that very stubbornness that paves the way for the new. But we must distinguish. True progress only comes from those who put their skin in the game. Those who merely insist on giving orders from afar bring only toxicity in daily life. You can see this principle in things that seem trivial. If just one person in the family resolutely avoids plastic, the whole family will have to change their habits. If one child is allergic to peanuts, the school menu will change. The inflexibility of the minority, even a child, is strong enough to compel the majority to yield. And at the societal level, we are always living under that pressure. The only question is which minority group will seize the power to dictate. As I write these lines, I want you to recognize a cold truth. The majority does not lead. It only follows. All great changes begin with a small, uncompromising group. The important thing is whether that group puts their soul in the game or not. If they do, they can lead society forward. If they do not, they drag everyone down into the abyss. This is the final piece of the first part. From Montes being lifted from Mother Earth to the code of Hammurabi to Fat Tony, all possibly to one principle: no truth exists without skin in the game. And the greatest paradox, sometimes it is a small minority, through persistence, that becomes the one determining the fate of the majority. I have observed dogs throughout my life and always found them similar to those who settle for security. They live relying on the collar, they are fed, they are petted, but the price is the forfeiture of their wild instinct. Opposing them is the wolf, leaner, living shorter, but every day is tied to real danger and hunting. This contrast is an allegory for humans in modern society. One side is willing to trade freedom for illusory safety. The other chooses to bear risk to keep its soul intact. In society, there are countless legal ways to bind a person: the signed contract, the promise of salary, stock options, and retirement benefits. All are chains made of gold. A pilot once told me that he could not quit his job because if he did, he would lose all his medical benefits and insurance. The company does not need to hold him by force. It only needs to make him mortally afraid of loss. Thus, a healthy man becomes a voluntary hostage. I remember the logic that Ronald Coase once described. Why do people choose to work within a firm rather than trade freely on the market? The answer lies in transaction costs. But what is hidden deeper is fear. Inside the walls of the corporation, people feel safer even if they have to trade freedom. Thus, a new kingdom was formed, Bureaucratistan, a land where bureaucracy rules, where people comply with paperwork more than instinct. The danger is that this feeling of stability fosters self-deception. People think they are protected, but in reality, they are gradually losing their capacity to resist. Someone accustomed to living within the company's embrace will tremble when they have to decide their own fate. That cowardice is contagious, creating an entire class of company men, individuals willing to remain silent in the face of injustice, as long as their pension is not threatened. I see the contrast most clearly in the image of Constantinople. Many dynasties, many powerful forces besieged it, but for centuries, the city stood firm. Those inside the walls believed in its invincibility. They waited, delayed, living under the illusion that the walls would protect them forever. But one day, when the Ottoman cannons fired, all that waiting turned into mass death. The lesson here is bitter. Protracted safety breeds illusion. That illusion kills the instinct for survival. The wolves outside are different. They have no protective walls. Every day is a confrontation with hunger and enemies. But it is that very exposure that helps them retain their instinct. And that instinct is what makes survival a reality, not a model. When you belong to Bureaucratistan, you become a dog in a cage. You are fed, but you never again know what hunting is. And one day, when the cage disappears, you die instantly. The difference between the wolf and the dog is not just in form, but in soul. The dog fears loss. The wolf accepts death. The dog lives long but empty. The wolf lives short but real. And at the intersection of these two fates, we see the paradox clearly. Prolonged safety is just another form of destruction. Someone asked me, so which path is right? I do not have a simple answer, but I know for sure that a society of all dogs cannot evolve. It is the wolf-like individuals, those who dare to take risks, who open the way. But if everyone chooses to live on a leash, society will die in silence, like Constantinople in its final days. I once witnessed a friend sign a mortgage contract, pages and pages of paperwork, dozens of clauses, and he did not understand half of it. But the bank understood clearly, and the asymmetry was embedded in every single word. He thought he was just borrowing money to buy a house, but in fact, he had handed over a piece of his skin to a system where risk is never shared equally. I call this the gain with other people's skin. Such contracts make the borrower bear all the consequences, while the contract designer comfortably reaps the profits, like the story of two cats, one that truly hunts, the other that only pretends but still demands an equal share of the meal. Society is full of those who feed that pretending cat, turning it into a symbol of cleverness. The ethical principle here must be clear. If you generate a risk, you must internalize the consequences. You cannot push the bad part onto others. You cannot take the profits and force others to endure the losses. Any system that allows this will sooner or later explode. But we live in a world where the strong are skilled at evasion. They possess knowledge, lawyers, and connections. The weak sign papers without understanding that the signature is a sentence. This asymmetry is not only in economics, it also exists in what people call political violence. Look at those who order bombings from afar. They sit safely in comfortable chairs, sipping hot coffee and deciding that someone will die in a distant land. The executing soldier is the one who puts his life on the line. This is a disgusting exchange, the blood of others for the decisions of those far away. In a truly just world, the instigator must stand right at the scene, bearing the risk alongside the victim. Punishment is only meaningful when it targets the one who created the risk, not the one who was dragged into it. If a person plants a bomb, he must directly face the death he created. He cannot use others as tools. Why is it so hard for us to stop terrorism? The answer lies in the fact that the perpetrator does not put his own skin in the game. He hides, evades, and uses others as tools. When symmetry disappears, justice also disappears. But the paradox is that the modern system sometimes protects such people. Organizations, agencies, even governments create a protective shell that ensures the one giving the orders is never held to account. And so, the ones who suffer are still the voiceless. A society can only survive when boundaries are restored. You generate the risk, you bear it. No one is allowed to borrow someone else's skin to shield themselves. I think about this repeatedly and find that it reaches the core of ethics. Not abstract theories of fairness, not empty slogans, but a cold balance where word and action are linked by real flesh and blood. Otherwise, everything is just dangerous games, where a few are safe and the majority are pushed into the abyss. Many people in this era believe that we live in a simulation, that everything is just a series of signals running in a machine. That idea sounds intellectually stimulating, but it is actually just a way to evade the truth. Life is defined by risk. If everything were just a simulation, no pain would be real, no failure would be frightening, and no responsibility would need to be borne. That is the dream for those who want to benefit without commitment. True life is not in assumptions, but in collision. Every wound, every gasp for breath, every death on the battlefield or in the operating room reminds us that we do not live in a computer. Pascal once suggested a wager: believe in God, because if it is true, the reward is infinite, and if wrong, nothing is lost. But that is a cheap calculation, because Pascal dared not put his soul in the real fire. He merely calculated on paper as if life were an equation. I reject all forms of such safe wagers, because only when we bear real loss do we know which beliefs are worthwhile. The person who believes in God out of fear of hell is no different from the stock market player, who invests only for self-protection. True faith demands the price of blood, not logical arguments. From this also rises a modern creature I often mock: the intellectuals who think they are smart, but are actually foolish. I call them intellectuals who are knowledgeable yet profoundly stupid. They stuff their heads with terminology, charts, and formulas, but remain detached from the real consequences. They passionately argue about policy, but never have to live in the area. Where that policy is implemented. I remember a meeting at the university where people in academic gowns discussed the labor market. They talked about models, data, about Gaussian distribution. Outside, the worker who just lost his job does not know what his children will eat tomorrow. The gap between words and consequences is disgustingly vast. When intelligence exists only on paper, it becomes toxic. This is because those people are given power. They influence decisions, but never have to pay the price. They are the purest product of a society without skin in the game. The danger is clearer when they apply theory to real life. A formula might look beautiful on the board, but just one wrong assumption can destroy an entire economy. The designer of the formula receives an award, while millions of workers fall into unemployment. If they had to internalize the cost of that mistake, perhaps they would be more humble. The irony is that society honors this class of people. They receive awards, are interviewed on television, and are invited to advisory boards. Meanwhile, those who truly live with risk surgeons, firefighters, miners are rarely heard of. We have reversed the scale, praising the empty talker and neglecting the practitioner. And I want to emphasize, if intellect does not come with friction, it is just an illusion. A punch from reality can shatter 10 years of spurious knowledge. True wisdom comes from placing oneself in the danger zone, not from hiding in the ivory tower. Therefore, I do not believe in intellectuals detached from reality. I believe in the person who has dared to stake their own life. When people talk about inequality, they often look at income charts, at asset figures. But true inequality is not there. It lies in the fact that some people bear the risk and others do not. I once saw the shoemakers in a small neighborhood. They were envious of each other. Every coin paid by the customer was a reason for them to look at each other with jealous eyes. That is close, direct injustice, where every penny of profit is paid for with sweat. But compare that to a banker sitting 1,000 miles away, controlling capital without ever living in that community. If his decision is wrong, the taxpayers elsewhere are the ones who bear the consequences. That is the dangerous injustice, because it is not tied to concrete life. The rich are often hated, but not because they have more. The hatred stems from their immunity to risk. When a poor person fails, they lose everything. When a rich person fails, lawyers and the rescue system protect him. That difference creates an irreparable crack. Injustice is not static. It is dynamic. If society allows the poor a chance to rise and the rich to fall when they enter, then the wealth gap is still acceptable. What infuriates people is when the upper class becomes immune and the lower class can only look up. Inequality becomes toxic when it strips away the opportunity for trial and error. When it turns one group of people into immortals and the other into sacrifices. In that context, I turn to a strange concept, the Lindy effect, named after a small cafe that has survived through the years, needing no massive advertising, no government backing, and remaining persistently open. Time itself is proof that it has overcome countless risks, scientific theories, philosophical ideas, and cultural habits. If they survive through many generations, it means they have been tested. They are Lindy proof, revealing a mischievous truth. True experts do not need titles. Time is the certification. A scientific work that survives generations of critique is more valuable than hundreds of papers recently published. A book still read after 100 years is worth believing in. Lindy tells us that what has lived long has a high probability of living longer. I do not believe in experts just because they sit on advisory boards. I believe in experts filtered by time. A medical work that has cured diseases for half a century is more valuable than thousands of new, untested formulas. In a world full of inequality, Lindy brings a different kind of fairness. It is an impartial filter. It eliminates the weak and retains the strong, regardless of who wrote it, where they studied, or how many degrees they have. Time remains the ultimate judge. When skin is put in the game, everyone is vetted by time. A reckless merchant will be eliminated if he makes mistakes. A bad idea will disappear after a few generations. Persistent existence is the proof of validity. That is how time punishes the fake and honors the real. Inequality is not in the instantaneous difference, but in the ability to evade the harsh filter of time. The class protected from failure is the fake class. Those who are forced to pay the price every day are the ones truly living. I once stepped into an operating room where cold white light shone down on strained faces. The surgeon standing before me did not look like the familiar stereotype. He did not have a slick appearance. His hair was not neatly combed. Even his hands seemed rougher than expected. And it was he, not the person with the promotional look, whom I trusted. This paradox repeats everywhere. Truly skilled people often do not look the way we imagine. We are obsessed with form, and that form becomes a trap. Those who know how to act, dress, and speak eloquently are easily considered trustworthy, while the truth lies elsewhere. The following paragraphs were previously optimized and have been moved here for completeness. That idea sounds intellectually stimulating, but it is actually just a way to evade the truth. Life is defined by risk. If everything were just a simulation, no pain would be real, no failure would be frightening, and no responsibility would need to be borne. That is the dream for those who want to benefit without commitment. True life is not in assumptions, but in collision. Every wound, every gasp for breath, every death on the battlefield or in the operating room reminds us that we do not live in a computer. Pascal once suggested a wager: believe in God, because if it is true, the reward is infinite, and if wrong, nothing is lost. But that is a cheap calculation, because Pascal dared not put his soul in the real fire. He merely calculated on paper as if life were an equation. I reject all forms of such safe wagers, because only when we bear real loss do we know which beliefs are worthwhile. The person who believes in God out of fear of hell is no different from the stock market player, who invests only for self-protection. True faith demands the price of blood, not logical arguments. From this also rises a modern creature I often mock: the intellectuals who think they are smart, but are actually foolish. I call them intellectuals who are knowledgeable yet profoundly stupid. They stuff their heads with terminology, charts, and formulas, but remain detached from the real consequences. They passionately argue about policy, but never have to live in the area where that policy is implemented. I remember a meeting at the university where people in academic gowns discussed the labor market. They talked about models, data, about Gaussian distribution. Outside, the worker who just lost his job does not know what his children will eat tomorrow. The gap between words and consequences is disgustingly vast. When intelligence exists only on paper, it becomes toxic. This is because those people are given power. They influence decisions, but never have to pay the price. They are the purest product of a society without skin in the game. The danger is clearer when they apply theory to real life. A formula might look beautiful on the board, but just one wrong assumption can destroy an entire economy. The designer of the formula receives an award, while millions of workers fall into unemployment. If they had to internalize the cost of that mistake, perhaps they would be more humble. The irony is that society honors this class of people. They receive awards, are interviewed on television, and are invited to advisory boards. Meanwhile, those who truly live with risk: surgeons, firefighters, miners are rarely heard of. We have reversed the scale, praising the empty talker and neglecting the practitioner. And I want to emphasize, if intellect does not come with friction, it is just an illusion. A punch from reality can shatter 10 years of spurious knowledge. True wisdom comes from placing oneself in the danger zone, not from hiding in the ivory tower. Therefore, I do not believe in intellectuals detached from reality. I believe in the person who has dared to stake their own life. When people talk about inequality, they often look at income charts, at asset figures. But true inequality is not there. It lies in the fact that some people bear the risk and others do not. I once saw the shoemakers in a small neighborhood. They were envious of each other. Every coin paid by the customer was a reason for them to look at each other with jealous eyes. That is close, direct injustice, where every penny of profit is paid for with sweat. But compare that to a banker sitting 1,000 miles away, controlling capital without ever living in that community. If his decision is wrong, the taxpayers elsewhere are the ones who bear the consequences. That is the dangerous injustice, because it is not tied to concrete life. The rich are often hated, but not because they have more. The hatred stems from their immunity to risk. When a poor person fails, they lose everything. When a rich person fails, lawyers and the rescue system protect him. That difference creates an irreparable crack. Injustice is not static. It is dynamic. If society allows the poor a chance to rise and the rich to fall when they err, then the wealth gap is still acceptable. What infuriates people is when the upper class becomes immune and the lower class can only look up. Inequality becomes toxic when it strips away the opportunity for trial and error, when it turns one group of people into immortals and the other into sacrifices. In that context, I turn to a strange concept, the Lindy effect, named after a small cafe that has survived through the years, needing no massive advertising, no government backing. and remaining persistently open. Time itself is proof that it has overcome countless risks, scientific theories, philosophical ideas, and cultural habits. If they survive through many generations, it means they have been tested. They are linear proof revealing a mischievous truth. True experts do not need titles. Time is the certification. A scientific work that survives generations of critique is more valuable than hundreds of papers recently published. A book still read after 100 years is worth believing in. Lindy tells us that what has lived long has a high probability of living longer. I do not believe in experts just because they sit on advisory boards. I believe in experts filtered by time. A medical work that has cured diseases for half a century is more valuable than thousands of new, untested formulas. In a world full of inequality, Lindy brings a different kind of fairness. It is an impartial filter. It eliminates the weak and retains the strong, regardless of who wrote it, where they studied, or how many degrees they have. Time remains the ultimate judge. When skin is put in the game, everyone is vetted by time. A reckless merchant will be eliminated if he makes mistakes. A bad idea will disappear after a few generations. Persistent existence is the proof of validity. That is how time punishes the fake and honors the real. Inequality is not in the instantaneous difference, but in the ability to evade the harsh filter of time. The class protected from failure is the fake class. Those who are forced to pay the price every day are the ones truly living. I once stepped into an operating room where cold white light shone down on strained faces. The surgeon standing before me did not look like the familiar stereotype. He did not have a slick appearance. His hair was not neatly combed. Even his hands seemed rougher than expected. And it was he, not the person with the promotional look, whom I trusted. This paradox repeats everywhere. Truly skilled people often do not look the way we imagine. We are obsessed with form, and that form becomes a trap. Those who know how to act, dress, and speak eloquently are easily considered trustworthy, while the truth lies elsewhere. I call this the green lumber fallacy. A wealthy stock trader once made huge money from green lumber, yet he did not even know that green lumber meant unseasoned wood. What he did not understand about the terminology did not affect his success, because he excelled elsewhere, in sensing market signals. Conversely, many people who think they understand the concept clearly earn nothing. This is the difference between epistemology and operational understanding. A person can memorize all the jargon, but without direct friction, he will never truly know. Meanwhile, the clumsy, stammering person has the ability to survive and succeed. The world does not operate according to appearance, but according to the harshness of reality. I have seen this in other places as well. The truly effective gym does not look like the gym in advertisements. It is old. The smell of sweat permeates the wooden floor. The equipment is not shiny. But there, real bodies are trained. Conversely, the glossy gym, with mirrors everywhere, is often just a place to show off. Few truly become strong there. Modern people tend to judge by the surface. They want the doctor to be slick, the professor to be solemn, and the investor to be well-dressed. The problem is not just the distorted view, but that society has learned to empower the fake. We believe in appearance, giving the smooth talker the power to decide while eliminating those who truly know the job. This is why so many systems fail. They do not select by competence, but by form. And I learned a bitter lesson: never judge by sight. Truth often hides beneath an unpleasant exterior. Sometimes the person you need is the one who does not fit your taste, is not polished, but dares to put his hand into the real work. The modern world suffers from over-engineering. People decorate, embellish, build layers upon layers, and forget the core. The more layers of polish, the easier it is to conceal the inner weakness. While true strength is often simple, even crude, the doer often does not talk much. The talker often does not do much. And when we understand this, we begin to realize that wisdom lies elsewhere. Do not let yourself be fooled by appearance. Look for who genuinely bears the risk, who truly has skin in the game. And there is an irony: the wealthy, the seemingly untouchable, are the ones most easily poisoned, not by literal poison, but by their own choices. They may eat elaborate meals, seeking out expensive foods, but precisely because of this, they are susceptible to rare toxins that the poor never encounter. Their detachment from reality makes them easy victims of the sophistication they embrace. This is the paradox of progress. What we call sophisticated and luxurious is sometimes just another form of fragility. Illusory safety makes the upper class forget how to survive. They gradually turn into the most vulnerable people, despite being wrapped in silk and velvet. I always believe that truth is revealed only in action. Words are cheap. Everyone can declare honesty, integrity, and humanity. But if not accompanied by action, those words are just empty echoes, facta non verba deeds. Not words. That is the only standard to measure human worth. Look at the slogans hung everywhere. About social responsibility, about justice for all. But at the same time, the very people shouting them try to evade the smallest responsibility in their personal lives. They sell virtue as a commodity, turning it into a marketing tool. Companies put green labels on products while still dumping waste into the environment. Politicians talk about equality while pocketing dirty money. That is not virtue. That is business. The truth, as I have emphasized many times, is not in slogans but in the flesh. A person does not need to preach morality if they are willing to sacrifice for it. A warrior who falls protecting his comrade does not need to declare I am brave. His action itself is the strongest statement. Likewise, truth in life is not in the news. News is often accurate in detail, but wrong in overall context. They select, distort, and serve a certain purpose. Truth lies in direct experience, in unrecorded actions. The small, silent things are often more decisive than 1,000 articles. We live in a world full of contradictions. The more information, the further we drift from the truth. The more slogans, the more we lose true virtue. The saturation of words obscures the most important thing, the necessity of personal cost. I see the phenomenon of virtue signaling everywhere. People wear t-shirts with slogans, post calls to action on social media. But when stepping into real life, they dare not bear any small loss for the things they preach. Virtue turns into a stage, and that stage exists only thanks to the audience's apathy. When I understand this, I believe more than ever that value is not in outward display, but in silent commitment. True virtue does not need promotion. It only needs a person willing to put their hand in the fire. The paradox is this: the more society praises morality with words, the rarer true morality becomes. Peace is not a signature on a piece of paper. I have read enough treaties to understand that ink cannot keep blood from flowing. And conversely, peace does not only come from violence, from the corpses forming the basis for temporary silence. True stability lies elsewhere, in the balance where all sides must put their skin in the game. If one side has nothing to lose, peace is just a joke. I prefer to look at history not through thick history books, but through the emergency room. There, blood and tears recount the truth more clearly than any written word. Every wound is proof that the cost is always real. Peace is not decided at a summit, but in the bodies lying on stretchers. Therefore, every agreement is only trustworthy when the people signing it also place their lives on the line. Otherwise, it is just a pile of papers waiting to be torn up from here. I want to move on to something people constantly debate, but few understand: religion. People like to talk about faith, about the divine, but most do not know what they are talking about. Because cheap faith is easy to acquire, but true faith demands sacrifice. If you dare not lose anything, you do not truly believe. People can wear symbol, recite prayers, and participate in rituals. All of these are just signals, and signals are cheap. The divine does not need soulless chants. The divine only needs proof in blood. Look at those who have abandoned their personal lives, abandoned their lives to uphold their faith. They do not need to preach. Their sacrifice is the only measure. There is no worship without skin in the game. This may seem harsh, but it is the ultimate rule. If faith does not make you risk anything, it is just a performance. Someone claims to be faithful, but when faced with a choice between honor and safety, he chooses safety. And at that moment, all his prayers become meaningless. I once asked myself, does the head of a major church, the person considered a model of faith, truly believe? Or is he just a representative acting out a designed role? This question makes many uncomfortable, but it needs to be asked. If word and action are misaligned, how is he different from an atheist? The authenticity of faith cannot be measured by dogma or by magnificent buildings. It can be measured by personal cost. The one who dares to step into the fire for what he believes, that person has true faith. The one who only preaches in safety is no different from a skeptic. I recognize a consistent theme from the wolves, the merchants, the carpenters to the martyrs. Truth exists only when people put themselves at risk. Peace, justice, and faith all are empty if the speaker does not share the cost. When we understand this, we are no longer easily fooled by words, form, or rituals. We look only at one question. What have you dared to lose for what you believe? The answer to that question is the true portrait of a person. As I conclude this journey, I want to leave you with one question to ask yourself. How many times have you truly put your skin in a decision? And how many times have you stood aside, waiting for others to take the heat? That question is not just for political, financial, or religious figures, but for every single person, including you and me. Because if truth only appears when we accept risk, how real is our life? Think about the small decisions you make every day, a piece of advice, a signature, a moment of silence. Do you have the courage to bear their consequences, or do you evade them? The symmetry I have talked about throughout the book is not a distant philosophy. It lies in every relationship, every transaction, every meal. If you advise someone on a path that you yourself dare not walk, that advice is no different from poison. If you gain profit but leave others to bear the risk, then fairness has been betrayed from the root. The biggest lesson I want to pass on is this: never believe in words that are not accompanied by action. Never praise any success that does not involve loss. Never place faith in any system, person, or idea that is not inherently tied to a price to be paid. When you view the world through that lens, everything becomes cruelly clear. You will see what is real, what is fake, where the soul is in the game, and where it is just a performance. There is also a paradoxical but liberating truth. True freedom does not come from avoiding risk, but from daring to embrace it. Wolves may die sooner than dogs, but every day of theirs is real. It is the same for humans. Living in illusory stability may prolong longevity, but the soul will wither. Freedom is when you know you can lose everything and still dare to walk forward. I want to leave you with a challenge. The next time you intend to advise someone, ask yourself, would I dare to do this if I were them? The next time you make a decision that affects others, ask yourself, am I on that same boat? If the answer is no, perhaps it is time for you to step back. And if you find that what I have told you is not just a strange story, but reflects your own life, then please share your feelings. I want to know what paradoxes you see around you. What situations make you rethink fairness and responsibility? Because this book is not just mine. It becomes yours when you look into it, when you let it question yourself. Thank you for walking with me through every layer of idea, through the stories from Montes to Hammurabi, from Fat Tony to the martyred souls. Thank you for patiently listening in a noisy world, where everyone wants to talk, but few want to listen. I hope that as you leave, you carry with you at least one haunting question. Am I truly living? Or am I just standing aside while others pay the price for me? We will meet again in the next books.